Hi, I'm Jay, and this is the GeneralAire 1137 fan-powered humidifier. One of the questions that we periodically get from clients is, hey, there's water leaking out of my humidifier, how do I fix it? So I'm going to go over kind of the basic things that happen. So one is if there's water leaking right here. Now this is the water, the fresh water coming from your home that feeds into the humidifier itself. So if it's leaking right here, probably this nut just needs tightened, so get a couple of wrenches out here and just gently tighten this a little bit. If that does not solve the problem, then I would shut off the water, cut this pipe here about an inch down, and put a new nut on it, a new furrow, and put it all back together, because that's probably what's going on, is the compression fitting has failed. So that's the one issue. Another is up here. So this is called the feed tube. So if it starts to leak here, usually that's just a matter of tightening this fitting right here, this little brass nut. So I just tighten it up just a tad and see if that makes the problem go away. As we go up to the top here, another possibility is water leaking from, this is called the water distribution tray, and there's a cap on top of it. If for some reason water is leaking out from under this cap here, then the distribution tray is getting filled with too much water. Now there's a couple of possibilities for that. One would be if the pad itself were completely plugged up and it's just like a brick in there and the water has nowhere to go. Another would be if the distribution tray, which has multiple holes in it, if it were to be filled completely with calcium, and again the water had nowhere to go. The last but not least possibility is there's just way too much water going up this tube. So if, for instance, right in here is a orifice, it's hiding inside of this brass fitting. So if this orifice were to fail and be missing, for instance, and it just allowed a ton of water to go through the valve and up to the top here, the distribution tray potentially could not be able to feed all of that down through itself, and water could potentially rise high enough up inside of here to leak out this top edge. So if that were to happen, and if you were to pop this cover off and it was just overflowing with water, you're going to want to find out where all that water is coming from. If it's too much water, or if it just has nowhere to go because the pad is so plugged up that's directly underneath of this thing that it won't take any water because it's just turned into a brick. Last but not least would be down here. Every once in a while we get people call and they say, hey, there's water leaking out of this seam. That's between the drain pan and the bottom of the unit. If you have a problem with that, usually that's either caused by this drain being plugged up. So if I were to just squeeze this drain flat here and no water were able to go through it, the water would rise up the tube, fill up the drain pan, and then overflow out this edge here, the seam. So what you're going to want to do, the first thing is check to make sure that this drain is flowing properly. This one here on the demo unit, we have a nice clear drain, so it's easy to see if it's flowing or not. Under normal operation, when it's running, you'll see water trickling down this thing. If you see this thing is completely full of water, it should never be like that. So if it's completely full of water, that means the other end of this thing is plugged up. Now ours happens to be sitting inside of a piece of 3/4 inch PVC pipe, so it would be obvious on our application if that happened. But if you had this hose here, let's say it was, I don't know, 15 foot long and it's running across the floor in your basement, potentially it could get crimped or stepped on or plugged or something like that, and water would just rise all the way at the top, fill up this drain pan, and then overflow out the edge. So that's the first thing you're going to check is this pipe here empty, or is it totally full of water? If it's not totally full of water and water is leaking out of here, that's something else. So let's talk about that. There's a humidifier pad in here, and if you leave it in there too long, it's supposed to be changed once a year, minimum. So let's say you forgot and you left that pad in there for 5 years, and that pad turned into a brick. Well, the water has nowhere to go at that point, and potentially it could overflow that pad and leak into the cabinet itself, and then potentially leak out on this seam here. So if you have it leaking out of the seam, and this tube is not full of water, it's like empty like this, or just a trickle in it, but there's water trickling out of the seam here, I would shut the unit off, take this drain pan off of here, take a look at the pad and see what's going on with it, because you're probably going to find the pad is turned into a brick. And those are the common leakage problems. Thanks for watching. For additional help or questions, feel free to contact us.